All right, anything from the state before we bring the jury in?
Your Honor, just one thing to put on the record.
All right.
I was contacted this morning by Blair Beaudry, the daughter of Jim Beaudry. As you may recall, the defense made a motion to dismiss based on the alleged prejudice for violating the speedy trial right was that they assured us that Jim Beaudry had passed. I asked Ms. Beaudry this morning if her father had passed, and he is still alive.
Okay.
Your Honor, just for clarification, I don't know if you discussed his capacity. My understanding is that he's incapacitated, but did you?
Well, you said that.
I apologize. He's incapacitated, Your Honor.
All right. Anything else?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
Your Honor, just a clarification. As you know, I've got just a printout of the presentation. If I show the witness some of the printouts, show those printouts to the jury, does that make this then deemed admissible? I mean, I can reference the demonstrative evidence without it becoming admissible by virtue of my reference to it. Is what I'm asking.
Are you using it as a demonstrative?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any objection to him using it as a demonstrative?
Principal.
I mean, those are just still photographs of the presentation.
That's right.
On the screen yesterday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, as long as it's just taken directly from the presentation with no additions or deletions, that's fine. But just to be, that's not all they have. We did get them a jump drive with the actual presentation on it.
All
Is that okay, Your Honor?
right. I mean, you can use it as demonstrative evidence, just like they used the presentation yesterday.
That's all.
And I understand that's the same thing that he flashed up on the screen. You just have it on a sheet of paper.
That is correct.
Okay. That's no difference. All right. Anything else?
Mr. Your Honor.
All right. Let's bring the jury in. Let's when they get in. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope everyone had a good evening. Again, I want to thank you for being prompt this morning. That's a great assistance to the court. Make sure you have your own notepads and do not have anyone else's notepads. When we broke yesterday, we were in the middle of Officer Marcus's testimony. I'm going to have the clerk of court place him under oath again since we are starting a new day.
Please raise your right hand and place your left hand on the Bible. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give the court in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
These first kind of round of questions, I might refer to the slides I've got from the presentation that y'all provided to me on Monday. Okay?
Okay.
And just, I want you to have it. I may ask you to look at certain slides. Is that okay?
Sure.
Your Honor, may I approach so he has his view?
Your Honor, I just asked to see what he is showing the witness.
He's showing him exactly what y'all put on the screen yesterday. That's what we covered before the jury came in.
It's just not in the right order, so it may take him a minute to find the right slide.
Which was exactly what I was about to say. I apologize, they're not in the right order. But if you'll bear with me on that. Okay. I'd also ask that if I want to show one to the jury, I may take your copy because a couple of mine have a note on it.
Okay.
Let's start with this example of cell site location information.
Bear with me a moment.
No problem. Again, I apologize for that portion of this. Okay, you have it?
I do, but this is not an accurate depiction of my presentation. There are marks on this that were not on mine.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see that. That was a doodle. Okay. Let me ask you this one then. Let me ask you this. When you're looking at the cell tower diagram that you provided, it's got this angle, correct, that goes out that way?
Correct.
Okay. And then there's like a little shaded area close to the angle, right?
Yes. There
Okay.
should be a shaded area inside of the angle depicted on the graph.
And just so it's clear for the jury, that shaded area really means nothing, correct?
The shaded area is just a graphic aid. It's supposed to show that the phone is in the general direction inside of that angle.
Okay. So it doesn't actually mean anybody's there or near that particular spot based on that shaded area.
The shaded area is not a depiction of the location, the exact location of the device. It's just to help show that they're within that angle as it protrudes out.
Could you locate, you also talked about PCMD per call measurement data, right? That's
Correct.
And that's part of the CSLI, cell site location information, is that what that stands for?
Correct. Sometimes we can get per call measurement data when we get those records back.
Okay. Could you locate this one, the example?
Locate what?
Yeah, I'm sorry, a
Specifically.
copy of it, I'm sorry, in what I handed you.
Sorry.
No, I apologize. Okay, do you have it in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And there's a band, as I understand it, at the end of it, is that right?
Yes.
Can I show that to the jury real quick? I'll hand it right back to you. Did we scribble on that one too?
No,
Okay.
sir.
That's the band I'm referring to. I'm sorry, moving fast. Everybody see that band? Thanks, sir. That band is, as I understand your testimony yesterday, is measuring the distance that the phone is from the tower. Is that correct?
That's the approximate distance of the phone from the tower at the time of the connection. Yes.
Okay. And so as I'm looking through to see if that information is reliable, I would expect to see, if I ever saw a GPS pin and there was also cell tower information, I would expect that pin to be on that band.
It would be close to that band, yes. There is a margin of error with that distancing data, but if the two sets of data occurred at the exact same time, they could line up with each other, yes.
Okay. But you didn't show one slide yesterday, sir, where your pinpoint lined up with your band on it. On it.
There was no slides that I displayed yesterday that had two separate sets of information. So in this instance, per call measurement data and GPS location, I did not have two sets of data at the exact same time to be able to mirror up as you described.
So you did not cross-validate that so we would have a better understanding of where that phone was at that time?
I did not have any per call measurement data to validate with GPS location data.
So why are there bands on there if it's not, what is the band for then, sir?
The band in this particular example, or the band?
You know the band that you have throughout the presentation?
There was, to my recollection, hold on, give me just a moment.
Sure. You got it right here in front of you.
In my presentation yesterday, I had per call measurement data for Gregory Rice's cell phone records. I only had one per call measurement data listing for Christopher Dontell's, or one of Christopher Dontell's records. However, I had no per call measurement data for any of Megan Jackson's cellular records.
Okay. So like if you found this slide of Greg Rice's,
Can I just, Your Honor, just so that I can know what he's referring to, if I could just see this
that's
slide.
the show to you.
Thank you.
I have this particular slide in front of me, however, it's not an accurate depiction of my presentation from yesterday. There's additional markings on it.
Okay. Your Honor, would you forgive me a circle? Mary Ann, would you forgive me a circle?
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I apologize. May I show this to the jury, Your Honor? Yes. Do you, as we're looking at this, there's a pin, right? Is that correct?
The pin in this slide represents the location of Gregory Rice's residence.
Okay, so in some of these, you give us, so here we got the band means nothing in this one. Is that right?
The outer band?
The outer band.
The outer band is the approximate distance of Gregory Rice's device at the time of this connection.
Okay, so we know then by looking at this that the outer band is not in line with the pin.
That's correct. However, it is within the margin of error that you typically see with these types of records, which is
Okay.
about 100, 150 meters on either side of that band, just depending on the strength of the connection at the time.
Okay. And so if we're trying to rely on this for where a phone is at a particular time, we have to be fair and understand that I could seriously be outside this room, right? I could be outside this room, and my phone, the band, is not going to show accurately where I am, right?
It depends on the signal strength of connection at the time of that connection, but typically these records are within 100, 150 meters of that distance from the tower.
And 150 meters, can you, how,
It's about the length of a football field, a little bit more than a football field.
okay, all right. And so that could be important, you know, if something is happening outside these walls, your phone and my phone are pointing to the same tower. If I'm in here and someone's sitting right out there, is that correct?
I don't understand the question. Can you ask it again?
If we're going to use, if something were to happen outside these walls, right? A crime is committed right there in the hallway, and you have access to all of our phones. I don't let y'all bring y'all's in, but you have access to all of our phones, and you measure our location, our cell tower location, right? It's going to show that we are in the same area, right? Is that right?
Can you rephrase the question? I'm still having a hard time following your...
Okay. Your CSLI does not, it is flawed in that I can be here and someone can be out there. And if you're looking at both phone data, it's going to say we are in the same area, right?
What's the second set of data you're talking about? You're talking about cell site location information, which is generated from the connection of the cell phone to a tower.
Yeah.
What's the second set of data that you're...
The other person's phone.
Cell site location data?
Yeah.
The cell site location data for that provider could or may be a little off, just kind of depending, again, on the connection, the signal strength of the phone during that connection.
We have another variable. Okay.
Yes, there are several variables, which is why we attempt to validate as much of the information as we can with other data sources when we do this type of analysis.
Okay. All right. Well, one of the things that's peculiar about your analysis to me is that, because I know you would consider the data in the case, right? When you testify as an expert, you consider all the data?
Consider the... Yes.
And so part of this extraction data includes chats, messages, videos, images. There's a lot of data in these extractions, right?
So my analysis contained the cell site location data for these
Oh,
devices.
no. Don't you tell me that now.
Objection, Your Honor.
No, oh, it's my cross examination. Don't you tell
Hold
me.
for a minute, she's raising an objection.
He's not letting Sergeant Marcus respond to his question. He was in the process of answering the question, and Mr. Britton is like, oh, don't tell me that.
I don't think that was overruled. Go ahead.
So you took this stand as an expert, and you're going to try to tell me that you did not consider all of the data.
When you're doing an analysis on geolocation data, the context of a text message is not necessarily relevant to placing a device in a particular location. Cell site location information from a tower gives you the distance from the tower. A GPS hit could give you the point in time or the point in space where a particular device is at. Whether someone is texting this person or that person talking about the weather isn't necessarily relevant for doing a location analysis, which is what I did in this particular instance.
But it is relevant. You were also a part, you weren't just a GPS guy, sir. Right? You did other things in this investigation.
I did.
Okay. You were heavily involved in this investigation, wouldn't you say?
I conducted some witness follow-ups. I imaged some devices for further analysis, and I conducted this analysis of the location information that was provided to me.
You co-signed a statement made by Chris Dontell.
Yes, I was in a part of an interview as well, like I mentioned.
And when we are talking about analyzing data, you said the word context. This doesn't give us any context, does it, sir? Your presentation gives us no context. It doesn't tell us what Megan Jackson and Chris Dontell have discussed or are discussing, right? Do you agree with that?
Correct. Those cell phone records cannot tell me what, if any discussion was going on at the time, just that there was a connection between their phones.
And they also can't tell you anything about who has a motive. Is that right?
No, cell phone records don't provide that type of information either.
And you could, because it's part of your data, go back and cross-validate and see what they were discussing in the text messages and chats beforehand to get an idea of motive and intent, right?
That analysis was provided to another officer in this case. That was not my particular participation in this case.
But you said you read all the data, sir.
No, sir, I did not. I said I reviewed the data that was given to me for my geolocation analysis.
Sir, are you going to sit here and tell me that as an expert, you said you were an expert in cell phone extraction, is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're a digital forensics expert. Is that what you purported to be?
Yes, sir.
And you didn't consider the information, the critical information and data that would give this jury context for what was happening on this evening.
I analyzed the data for my particular part in this investigation, which was the geolocation analysis of the devices involved in this case. As far as additional analysis for digital devices, that was done by Lieutenant Ben Wells with the York County Sheriff's Office. That was not my job in this particular case.
You were one of the 9 or so visits to Flint Lake Apartments, weren't you, sir?
9 or so visits. I don't recall going up to Flint Lake 9 times.
You were part of some of those visits, weren't you, sir? You under it?
Objection, Your Honor. He's thinking. He's trying to answer the question. It's not necessary to say you're under oath.
I believe I conducted 2 follow-ups at Flint Lake Apartments.
And when you did so, y'all already had the cell phones of Megan Jackson and Chris Dontell.
At the time of my first follow-up, I was not aware of that. They may or may not have. It was early in the investigation. At the time of my second one, yes.
Okay. And so, as we talk about this quote-unquote crime scene, one of the things we know is the time you were out there yourself, Megan Jackson and Chris Dontell were already suspects, right? At one of your visits.
Correct.
In total, y'all canvassed the area 9 times, right? You may not know that.
I don't have that information.
Okay.
No, that was not part of my participation in this case.
Okay. But you were pretty heavily involved now, weren't you? You were one of the few that's there. This thing took y'all so long. You were one of the few that was there in the beginning, right?
No, sir, I was not initially assigned to this case in the beginning.
Oh, okay, sorry, it was 10 days. Was it 10 days after?
I didn't get involved in this case until almost 2 or 3 weeks after. In fact, for 2 weeks during the initial part of this case, I was out of town in training.
That's right, because you weren't actually qualified yet to do what you're in here testifying about at the time you were involved in the investigation.
Objection, Your Honor.
Hold for a second, she's ready to objection.
Oh.
What's the grounds for the objection?
Well, I don't believe that when Your Honor qualified Sergeant Marcus as an expert, it was pinpointed in time, or I don't believe Your Honor made a ruling, well, you're an expert as you testified here today, but I'm not going to find that you were an expert earlier. So I think saying he was not an expert is not the proper phrasing for that.
So, I believe you got involved earlier, that's fine. You were involved at a time when they were suspects to this crime.
Yes.
Okay. And you stayed with it right to the very end. Is that correct, sir?
I did. I conducted some follow-ups and this analysis that I presented yesterday.
And despite the multiple visits to Flint Lake Apartments, you and your investigative team operated under the impression that this crime occurred at Myrtle Beach funeral home. Isn't that correct, sir?
A early theory in the case was that this did occur, or could have occurred at the Myrtle Beach funeral home, yes. It was one of the theories in the case.
I've been here, and we've been here to hear that changed. They didn't know for 4 years until Chris Dontell came in and told everything. Did you collect any other evidence other than the testimony of Chris Dontell that would change the crime scene, sir?
I personally did not know.
No. And you don't know of any either, do you, sir?
I'm sorry.
You don't know of any other evidence that was collected by any other part of your investigative team that modified the location of this crime until Chris Dontell made his deal with the state.
No, I'm not aware of any other evidence.
And so, if we're to believe that this occurred at Flint Lake Apartments, then we've got to rely on Chris Dontell. Is that correct, sir?
Can you restate the question again?
If we're to believe that this crime occurred at Flint Lake Apartments, we've got to rely on the word of Chris Dontell.
I imagine that the jury would need to rely on all of the evidence presented in this case to make a decision.
But you didn't. You didn't change your opinion about where it occurred until Chris Dontell gave a statement, sir, that you co-signed. Put your name on it.
Quite often during an investigation, when new evidence comes to light, it can change the direction of the investigation.
Okay. So you agree with me?
Agree with you on what part?
That's what changed the direction of your investigation, the word of Chris Dontell.
Chris Dontell's statement did add that extra evidence, and we did consider another crime scene.
And you were going to testify on December 6th at the trial, Chris Dontell, weren't you?
Yes, I was a state witness subpoenaed for that trial.
In fact, the presentation that I got was dated right before that, a few days before that trial. So you were going to present this essentially same information in the case of Chris Dontell.
Yes.
Okay. Now here's how we know we can't rely on your evidence, sir. You were going to use that same evidence to try to convince 12 people it happened at Flint Lake Apartments. I mean, at the Myrtle Beach funeral home. Weren't you, sir?
I was going to present my analysis as part of this courtroom this trial, yes.
And when you got to the part where when Megan Jackson was picked up, where Red Rice was picked up by Megan Jackson, were you going to say, oh, and right here, by the way, she killed him? You weren't worried.
No, sir.
You were going to say she picked him up and delivered him to the Myrtle Beach funeral home alive.
No, sir.
Oh, really?
My presentation cannot establish at what point in time Gregory Rice's life ended. It just shows the location of the devices during that period in time on October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th.
But in your case against Chris Dontell, your evidence was going to be used to show a jury that he was alive when he got to the Myrtle Beach funeral home.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Your evidence, your presentation, was going to be put up by the state to aid them in proving that Greg Rice was alive when he got to the Myrtle Beach funeral home.
My presentation, again, doesn't depict whether someone was alive or dead at a particular period of time. It just shows the connections and the locations or the general area of where those devices were at that period of time.
You want to keep focusing just on your GPS, and I understand that, but you also were involved other ways in this case, weren't you, sir?
Yes, I did conduct some witness interviews.
Okay. And you had mentioned you read the data in this case. And so I want to ask you about some of that data, and you can tell me whether or not you considered it, because I want to show this jury some context. Because that's what you told us, right? Your GPS doesn't do a whole lot about context, does it?
The context depends on the data, yes.
Oh, before we get there, I'm sorry. I want to back up real quick. There was a slide that just occurred to me that I didn't see in what was sent to me. Maybe it was there, maybe it wasn't. I'm not putting any casting aspersions on anybody, but there was a 10:05 movement. Y'all kind of threw in there a 10:05 movement, and I hadn't seen it before, showing that Greg Rice was leaving. I think you said he was leaving the area. Is that what you said?
At 10:05, between 10:05 and 10:06 on October 2nd, 2020 is the first time that you see a tower shift. That suggests that that device is moving away from his residence, yes.
But in your initial, did you say residence that time?
The area of his residence, yes, sir.
Okay, because in the only timeline I ever got from y'all, not the one y'all showed in court, one I actually got, your timeline says Greg Rice left his apartment, his phone left his apartment at 10:05. Isn't that what your original timeline showed us?
The presentation shows his device leaving the area of his apartment at 10:05 p.m., just a little after 10:05.
Okay. And that probably would have fit the narrative you would have been pitching in your case against Chris Dontell. Megan Jackson pulls in, she goes to his apartment. Like every man, he fiddles around for a couple seconds. He comes out and gets in the car, and there's a minute drive to get out at 10:06. You agree with that?
Can you restate that, sir?
Sure. You'd have been testifying. Megan Jackson pulls into Flint Lake Apartments. She comes through the gate at 10 o'clock at Arrowhead. She makes her way down. pulls up to Greg Rice's apartment. He comes out, gets in the car, and they leave at 10, and they leave the apartment at 10:05, and they're out the gate at 10:06.
So my testimony was that the cell site location information for those Greg Rice's device shows he was in the area of, or the phone was in the area of his house for that period of time. Right around 10 o'clock, the license plate reader for Megan Jackson's vehicle is picked up as it's coming into the village of Arrowhead. At 10:05 p.m., just before 10:06 p.m., you see the tower shift for Greg Rice's phones, and at 10:06 p.m., Megan Jackson's van is picked up by the license plate reader leaving Arrowhead.
And we know the state would have had to try to spin that as Megan Jackson has a live person in her car, Greg Rice. Because part of your presentation also was that Dontell was still back at the funeral home. Isn't that right?
Again,
Your Honor. That's a mischaracterization of the presentation and his testimony.
Just add on, I mean, read that, go ahead.
Again, my presentation and my testimony only shows the movement of these devices or this data displayed on a map. The phone's in a particular area, it moving, the license plate reader capturing a car, it moving, nothing more.
Okay. So you agree with me then that if this jury, if part of a deliberation is require someone to develop an intent, maybe even a motive, what you presented is not very helpful.
Your Honor, that's also a mischaracterization of the law because motive is not an element of the crime.
I understand. Go ahead.
Again, my presentation only shows the movement of these devices and from the data that I analyzed.
Okay. Now, one of your slides, let's look at, you still have that up there with you?
I still have these slides up here, yes.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to take a peek at the slide when Megan Jackson is leaving River's Edge.
Which one?
It's the LPR. It's actually a still photo, I believe, sir.
I believe I know which one you're talking about. If you could show me those so I make sure I have the correct
No
one.
problem.
This one right here. You don't have to get, I showed it to her with my hand covered up and all over.
Sure. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What do we have here?
This particular slide shows a still image that was captured, or from the security footage from the gate leaving River's Edge community. One of these images depicts the van driven by Megan Jackson, or typically driven by Megan Jackson, and the other one is a Ford Explorer. That is consistent with what Christopher Dontell drives.
Okay. And although difficult to see, you are aware that there's something in the passenger seat of Megan Jackson's vehicle. And it is hard to see. But you know what's there.
Yes, there appears to be an object in her seat.
And that object has a name, doesn't it, sir? You know from your investigation that object has a name. Blow up Betty. Right? You aware of that?
I believe there was a reference to something called Blow Up Betty, yes.
Okay. And if you consider the data, and I'm going to test you what data you consider more specifically, you would know there was a conversation, a chat. In fact, maybe I'll put in notes. There was a chat between Megan Jackson and Chris Dontell where he asked to go to a shooting range that night, right?
Yes.
And she says, I'll bring who?
Blow Up Betty.
That's right. on the night of October 2nd, the context you have, this section the jury haven't seen yet, is what's on Megan Jackson's mind is sex. Sir?
Was there a question with that, sir?
Isn't that right?
I have no idea what's going through Megan Jackson's mind at any point in time.
You would agree with me, though, that taking, well, if you consider the data, you would know that she was saying we can fool around with Blow Up Betty, right? There was some context there again.
I was made aware of the message. I don't know the entire content of the chat.
And so, yeah, it looks sketchy going out there to the preserve. But you also know, if you read the data, that that's something they did pretty often. Well before any issues with Greg Rice, Megan Jackson liked to go out and shoot some guns. Shoot a gun, right?
I'm not aware of that, no.
You mean to tell me you didn't read the data in this case to get an understanding about their relationship?
No, sir, that was not my purview in this case. That was not my function in this case.
Sir, that is part of your extracted data.
I did not extract that particular phone.
That's right. That's right. But you were allowed to testify to a phone that you did not extract. So I'm going to ask you about some of the other data that you did not extract. Sorry, I got too much call. Court's indulgence. In that data, it is extremely clear, with pictures, messages, that the affair going on between between Megan Jackson and Chris Dontell is hot-headed. Agree with that?
Again, I didn't look at all of the data in these phones.
So we can mark that down as data you did not consider. I guess you also didn't consider how common it was for them to park their car in a place like Lowe's or the fire station, leave a vehicle there, leave Chris's vehicle there specifically, and go in her car back to Megan Jackson's house.
That did come up in the investigation, yes.
Okay. And as a GPS guy, you could have tracked that to verify that that was part of their habit, right?
If that data was available, yes.
If it was available. And we know it is. The extraction is volumes of information, right?
Yes.
It's volumes of information. And part of that information also shows you that Chris Dontell was lying over and over and over and over and over again to his wife.
That is information that came up during the investigation. However, it was not information that I reviewed for my analysis.
Okay. There's also information in there, maybe you had a chance to review this, that Greg Rice was sending messages to Erica Dontell anonymously that Megan Jackson was pregnant with her husband. Greg Rice was exposing the affair in Megan Jackson's pregnancy. That's part of the data from the extraction.
Objection, there's no
Isn't
question
it?
there, Your
Isn't
Honor.
it?
Ask a few questions.
Isn't it, sir?
There was a lot of devices that were extracted. I did not review all of them. I know that the affair was brought up during the investigation, was learned during the investigation, but the specifics behind how the affair was outed, I don't have any information on.
So you did not consider the data that related to Greg Rice causing Chris Dontell a massive nightmare in terms of his relationship with Megan Jackson and her pregnancy. Is that what you're telling the jury?
That information is not considered relevant when you're trying to determine the location of a device at a particular period of time.
That's not all you're doing, sir. I mean, that's not all you're doing, sir. You were involved in this investigation.
Objection, Your Honor. That is not a question.
Weren't you, sir?
Abstain,
Yes, sir.
keep it to questions, don't testify to the jury.
Yes, sir. Did you consider any information, any text between Chris Dontell and Megan Jackson, where Chris Dontell identified that he was afraid of Greg Rice?
No, sir. Again, that was not part of my part in this particular case. All of that would have been done by a different detective.
Okay. You don't, as we see here today, you missed that part of the extraction where he's so nervous about Greg Rice, he's scared to go to his mailbox.
Again, that was not data that was pertinent to my part of the investigation. That's not something I reviewed.
So you also might not have reviewed, maybe you did, I don't know, maybe someone shared this portion of the data with you, that Chris Dontell was seen sneaking around the Myrtle Beach funeral home on September 20th, sir, by himself. Isn't that right?
I have no information about anything regarding that.
Looking for a key, sir? You don't know about that?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay. Did you see in the data where 5 days later or so, he lied to Megan Jackson about having found a key to the funeral home in his car? Did you review that data?
Again, that was information not reviewed by me. I have no knowledge of any of that.
And not only, and you would agree with me though that if you're trying to determine motive, intent, why people are where they are this evening, that kind of information might be beneficial. You agree with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
So
question?
if we're trying to figure out why people are where they are, what's going on in their relationships and in their lives, provides context for us. You agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yes. Sometimes the location information can be helpful in... Sometimes context about people's lives can be helpful in determining whether location information is normal or abnormal.
It could also maybe help you determine whether or not Chris Dontell is being reliable when he tells you a story about what happened.
If someone had mentioned that they were at a particular point in time and you took location information that you had for that same point in time, you could help corroborate or dispel a statement, yes.
Okay. And so we know that on December 6th, you co-signed a statement that Chris Dontell wrote. And in that statement, where did he tell you, what he told you that Chris Dontell, he told you that he was at the funeral home and Megan Jackson just brought him a body. Is that correct? Is that essentially what he told you?
Do you have a copy of the statement that I could look at so that I can testify to it accurately?
I do have it. Excuse me. Let me give you this one. This was one we got. I'm going to see if I can find the, this is what was provided to us, government efforts witnesses.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Can I just see what he's showing the witness?
Yeah. Let me see if I can find the, version of that.
I'm happy to just look at what he's handing the witness. I don't need my copy. I just want to see what he's showing.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Take time. Give a read.
Yes, I recognize this. What is the question again?
See if I can remember. Oh yeah, on this date you signed this document, Chris Dontell's version of events are that Megan Jackson, without his knowledge, on her own accord, drove over, took up Greg Rice, and came back with a body, dead body. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, this was a statement that was provided to us. However, he recanted that statement shortly afterward.
So you sat down with him, right, because you signed it, sir?
Correct.
This is the story he told. And then, within an hour, how long was it before he came up with a new story?
Sure, within an hour, I guess is inaccurate.
Within 1 hour. That man goes from saying a body was brought to him to now what is he telling him, wants to believe? That he was he an eyewitness? Is that what he told you?
He was a witness.
Now he's trying to tell you he went with Megan Jackson over to Greg Rice's apartment. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
And he witnessed the whole thing. Is that what he told you, sir?
Yes.
So, could you, based on, after you got that information, did you make a trip back out to Flint Lake Apartments?
No, so we made the trip to Flint Lake Apartments before speaking with Christopher Dontell.
Okay. And then after he changed the story and told you that he was a witness to it, did you guys go back out there after that?
No, sir.
Okay. So he didn't take you and show you where this occurred?
I believe he drew something at that time.
Oh. That must have happened. So, based on the drawing that I don't believe I have, where does he, in his most recent version, claiming this occurred?
Roadside on Arrowhead Boulevard, before you get to Flint Lake Apartments.
Okay. And don't we know that can't be true, sir?
No.
Okay. Well, if he's out there on the roadside already, but he's left his apartment, hasn't he?
Who has?
Greg Rice has already left his apartment, hasn't he?
I don't have the ability to answer that question. I have
You
no idea
do,
if he
sir.
did or
You
not.
are here for GPS, don't you, sir?
I am here for the cell site location information and GPS. That's correct.
Okay. So you're telling this jury that you don't believe Chris Dontell has changed version, and he says it happened out there on Arrowhead Road, right? Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Which is away from the apartment. Correct, sir?
It is in between the apartment and the license plate reader hit at Clay Pond and Arrowhead Boulevard.
That's right. And so if his phone doesn't ping, change directions until 10:05, we know that can't be true, sir. Because he has to already be out there.
I don't understand the question.
He should.
Objection, Your Honor.
I apologize. Y'all slung into the presentation a 10:05 ping. Isn't that correct, sir?
Yes, there was a 10:05 connection that shows that the device is moving.
That's right. And for him to get from his apartment to somewhere down the road on Arrowhead, he's got to walk, right, sir?
Correct.
Okay? And when
Or-
he starts, I'm sorry?
Or ride in a car.
Okay? But that's not what his statement says, is it, sir?
Whose statement?
Dontell doesn't say that anybody gave him a ride from the apartment out to the road.
The written statement, no.
How about the other statement?
His verbal statement did not say that someone gave him a ride from the apartment to the road.
Okay. So there's a lot of inferencing going on, but we could probably infer that he walked. I mean, someone was going to pick him up, right?
From what I understand from the statement, it was supposed to be Megan Jackson and Christopher Dontell picking him up.
Okay. So he was going to walk to that area. So we can pretty safely assume he walked. Right, sir?
Okay?
Okay. Would you agree with that, don't you?
That he walked?
Yeah.
I have no information to say that he didn't or did.
Okay. And your testimony yesterday was that when those phones start to move, that's when they ping to a new location. Isn't that correct, sir?
My testimony yesterday was that between 6 o'clock, I believe 5 o'clock, and 9, almost 10 o'clock at night, 10:05, the Greg Rice's phone was pinging in the same area, which was at his residence, and at 10:05 was the very first movement, which was a change in tower that we saw, which corresponded with a license plate reader hit of Megan Jackson's van.
But if it's pinging, sir, if it's pinging, this story is accurate. How then does it not ping before 10:05 if he left his apartment and is walking to a location to be picked up?
The section of road, number one, is serviced by that same tower area around his house. Number two, the cell site location information was collected and analyzed is only captured when the device makes that connection to the tower. There was a period of time for about 2 or 3 minutes that there were no connections to the tower.
So then you don't know. Just tell me, you don't know when Red Rice left his apartment.
I can give you a time frame of a few minutes, but I can't get any tighter than that.
Yeah. As we sit here today, you also had some more involvement in this case. I want to remind you, if I could, sir. Didn't you field a call and create a report related to an incident where Chris Dontell?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
All right.
You were involved in a subsequent investigation. There was during 4 or 5 years of this investigation that included Chris Dontell allegedly attempting to hire someone to kill Megan Jackson. Isn't that right, sir?
Yes.
As we sit here today, are you prepared to ask this jury to take the word of Chris Dontell, who, as you know from your data review, had a very hot relationship with my client, Megan Jackson, behind her back, over and over again, right? You agree that was part of this investigation, right? This affair?
Correct.
Okay. So he's lying to her. He stood up in this, and he's also, not only is he lying to her, he lied to this court. He lied to this court too, didn't he, sir? Did you know that on the day that he took a plea, right? On the day that he took a plea, that same day, he gave you 2 different versions of the event. Isn't that correct, sir? December 6th, 2024.
I don't recall if that was the same day of his trial or plea
Okay.
or not.
Okay. On December 6th, 2024, after he made a statement in court about his involvement in the case, he then sat down with you, sir, isn't that correct?
I don't know if he gave a statement of his involvement in this courtroom or not, sir. I wasn't in the courtroom at the time
Okay.
that that trial occurred at the time. I was a sequestered witness.
When you sat down with him, you knew that he struck a deal.
I knew that he had pled to a charge presented in court at the time, yes.
And in the statement that he gave you, there is no evidence, no testimony from him that there was any kind of joint planned attempt to kill Greg Rice. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And in the second version that he told, where he says he was with her, in that version, it was still a surprise to him. She just jumped out the car and started firing. Isn't that what he said, sir?
Yes.
And so in his second version, he doesn't talk about there being any plan or agreement to kill Greg Rice. You agree with that, don't you?
To my recollection, yes.
And so after all this time, that's the person you're asking this jury to rely on to help you establish a crime scene, a motive, intent. Is that something you're asking them to rely on, sir?
That particular question belongs to the solicitor. My part in this is just to present the data that I analyzed to the jury so that they can make their decision at the end of everything.
But you signed the statement, sir.
I signed the statement as a witness, stating that I observed it.
Okay, and you took the interview. Didn't you, sir?
The case agent took the interview, not me. I was just present.
You were present.
Yes.
Didn't take you present. Court's indulgence, please. Right here somewhere. Oh, yeah. In your data. Well, in his statement, one of the things he told you is that she was the one who always has to go to the shooting range. Isn't that right?
In which statement?
That's right. That's what I'm sorry. In the one that you handwrote.
I don't recall.
You'd like to see it?
May I ask for the copy that was stapled just a minute ago? That's the one I recognized earlier. This one appears to have a bad copy at the top, cut off a line or two.
But it was doing that, you have no idea. All right?
Thank you. Bear with me a moment. This is 4 or 5 pages long. I'm trying to find
No problem.
if there's any reference in here.
No problem. And I'm getting close to being done.
Can you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, I just thought I recalled a reference where Chris Dontell says that Megan Jackson was the one who always asked about going to the shooting range.
There is a reference in here about liking to go to, always went shooting. It's the specific,
Is that a specific phrase?
and always went shooting.
You, in your data review, and I just want to make it clear for the record, you didn't consider, maybe you did you consider that on 9/28, 4 days before the disappearance of Greg Rice, that Megan Jackson warns Chris Dontell to be on the lookout for Greg Rice?
That was not part of my review, no. I'm not aware of any messages along those lines.
And you also then didn't review the follow-up message where she says, I just talked to Greg Rice, and if he sees Erica Dontell, your wife, he will tell her to her face what is going on. Did you consider that?
I'm not aware of any such messages, no, whether they exist or not.
Okay. We have one more question. Last little thing. On September 30th, just a few days before the disappearance of Greg Rice, Megan Jackson took groceries to his house for him.
I'm not aware of any such event, whether it existed or not.
You didn't see that message where Megan Jackson said, I'm headed over to take Greg Rice groceries?
Again, I'm not aware of any such information, whether it exists or not.
So,
All right, you're ready.
I'm going to sort of start at the end there. Just because someone texts something, does that mean they're telling the truth?
No.
And isn't it often that someone will text someone something and it is an outright lie?
I imagine that happens.
Would that be more or less likely if someone is planning a murder, that they would be less than truthful?
Most people that I've dealt with in my career are not necessarily truthful when they're involved in criminal activity.
And let me also just flesh out the rest of this incident where Mr. Dontell allegedly tried to have his co-defendant killed. First of all, let's give the whole story. The allegation was also that he was going to try and have me killed, correct?
Correct.
Did you and other investigators try to substantiate that allegation?
Yes, we did.
Were you able to?
No.
Meaning that there was no evidence that that actually happened.
Correct.
There's been quite a bit of questioning about Greg Rice's movements, from his apartment and in between that time and the hit on the LPR. The sectors are simply meant to show that the cell phone or the device is hitting off that same tower, correct?
Yes, there's 3 sectors on each tower. They point in 120-degree arcs in different directions. And those... What was the last part of your question? I apologize.
That's okay. Let me ask it this way. Is it possible for someone to be walking, but their device still connecting to the same tower?
Yes, if it's the strongest signal. If it's the strongest signal that the phone sees, it would still continue to connect to that tower.
When would it switch? When it found a stronger signal?
Correct.
The data that you had, that you analyzed for that particular point in time, was that simply tower information, meaning a device hitting off of a tower, or did you have Greg Rice's geolocation data?
I had no geolocation data for Greg Rice. I only had cell site location information.
Is geolocation data the one that is more accurate as to placing a device in a particular spot?
Yes. Stereotypically, it is much more accurate than cell site location information.
And I had to say this several times, but was your task with the cell phone analysis to determine device location or to determine content of communications?
So my task was to analyze geolocation information from cell phone records provided by the providers, and if that information was present on an actual device. Context was never part of my task for this particular investigation.
Would the content of either a phone call or a text message change where the phone is located?
No, not at the time of connection.
There were also quite a few questions about Christopher Dontell not telling the truth in interviews. Based on your review or your participation in the investigation, did Ms. Jackson always tell the truth in those interviews?
No.
Is it fairly normal? Well, I'll ask it this way. How many criminal investigations have you been involved in your career? I know, you'll probably have to estimate, but
18 years career, thousands. I would say over 10,000 cases.
when you speak with suspects, how often, if you can estimate, do they tell the truth right out the gate?
Very rarely.
Are you familiar with the term progressive truth-telling?
I've heard it before, yes.
What does that mean?
So essentially, a person will give a portion of the truth as they tell a story, and then as they're presented with facts or evidence that could dispel portions of it, they'll tell more and more of that story that has more and more of the truth in it.
Court's indulgence. So one of the things that might be used to, I guess, sort of confront someone, things like license plate readers, geolocation data, cell site location information.
Yes, during an interview, yes, we would use that information to help corroborate their statement or dispel it.
So if, for example, Megan Jackson said that she never went to Arrowhead Community the night of October 2nd, the LPR data could be used to contradict that, correct?
Correct, as well as the cell site location information.
I may have asked you this yesterday. We've established that, would it be possible for Greg Rice to have walked from his apartment, started towards the Clay Pond Drive exit, and used the same tower for a good bit of that time?
Yes.
When you looked at the two LPR hits that indicated that the van was in the Arrowhead community for about 6 or 7 minutes, did you go out and see whether it would be how reasonable it was that the van could go in and out that quickly?
I did go out and test that. I drove that myself, and you can drive from the LPR, which is at the entrance of Arrowhead, down to the Flint Lake Apartments, to his apartment, and turn around and drive back with some time to spare within that roughly 5.5 minute time frame.
Would that time, the sort of extra time, expand if Greg Rice had left his apartment and was walking down the road?
Yes.
There were also some questions about the date on your presentation. Megan Jackson was actually listed for trial in December, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So was your presentation prepared for the December trial of Megan Jackson?
Correct.
Did you in fact have a slightly different presentation for Christopher Dontell?
I did.
Court's indulgence. There was also this question about blow up Betty. I'm not sure I understood what Mr. Britton was inferring, but it seemed that he was inferring that maybe that was some sort of, it was going to be used as a sex toy. Could blow up Betty also be used for target practice?
I imagine you could, yes.
Court's indulgence for 1 moment. The presentation that you created and that we showed the jury, that was created prior to the December trial date, is that correct?
Yes.
When did you learn from Christopher Dontell that the murder had occurred in the Arrowhead community?
After I created my presentation.
Did you make any changes on your presentation based on that information?
No.
And again, you're not are you using, so I'm not leading, are you using any of this geolocation data, cell site location information, any of that, to say when specifically Greg Rice was alive or dead?
No.
Does the information, the cell phone information, seem to corroborate that Greg Rice was killed at some point in Horry County that night because his device stops connecting to a tower?
Yes, it does. It is abnormal. When we look at records, we'll typically look at a very long period of time of records if they're available. It looked, I believe, if I recall correctly, at least 3 months of his records, and there were constant connections to the tower on every day for 3 months, and then they suddenly stopped on October 2nd, 2020.
And based on your presentation and the data that you did analyze, of the 3 people, so Greg Rice, Megan Jackson, and Christopher Dontell, were any combination of them together the entire night?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase your
Yeah,
question?
that probably wasn't very well worded. I think your presentation started with the River's Edge LPR around 6:20 in the evening, ended the next day at like 12:15 in the morning.
Okay.
During that span of time, did your location data support that Christopher Dontell and Megan Jackson were together that entire time?
Yes, it did corroborate information. The investigation learned that they were together during that time.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, you may sit down.
Well, I'm not asking that you be released from your subpoena, just in case I need to call you back. It's his.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning break, take about a 10 or 15-minute break, put your notepads in the jury box, and I'll discuss. We'll be back in about 10 or 15.